We saw this year the closing of one of the historic main pillars of American Jewish life. We saw HUC in Cincinnati close. HUC in Cincinnati was the home, the wellspring of Reform Judaism. Isaac Mayer Wise, blah, blah, blah. And whether, you were a student at HUC in Cincinnati or JIR in New York, or you went to Los Angeles, everybody understood that the hub of Reform Jewish life came out of the Midwest, and more so, HUC. And HUC closed down because there aren't enough young people interested in becoming Reform rabbis. Just bottom line, what's it say to you that HUC shut down? And is JTS next? And what's happening to American Judaism if HUC has to shut down?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it is it's a loss in terms of historical memory and tradition. So in that respect, I felt very badly about it. The sense of part of the uniqueness of HUC was that it did have a campus right there in the Midwest, as opposed to New York and Los Angeles and Jerusalem, or in conjunction with those three other ones. So the sense of loss is quite real. I visited there numerous times. I lectured there. So I felt a sense of a great chapter in American Jewish history has been terminated.
Yes.
And that I felt terrible about. In terms of what's happening in the broader scale, look, you can't get away from the findings of Pew. The findings of Pew is that my kids used to tell me the definition of an adult is someone who has stopped growing at both ends and is growing around the middle. American Jewry is experiencing the exact opposite. It's growing at both ends among the Orthodox and among the unaffiliated. The two major movements, conservative and Reform Judaism, more conservative than Reform, have suffered significant losses, significant erosion. Reform has held its own primarily because it's become the welcoming address for mixed marrieds, which increasingly is becoming normative in American Jewish life, which again is a cause of considerable concern. But that may be only a temporary mechanism of holding on for a while. So in that respect, what's happening is that, the ends are growing, the middle is declining. With the decline of the middle goes the decline of the spirit of moderation. A sense perhaps on the part of those who would say that, yes, I have criticisms of Israel, people like yourself, but there's no questioning my allegiances. So in that sense, the decline of the middle is an enormous tragedy for the American Jewish community.
Eric, what does it mean to you? HUC in Cincinnati is no longer there.
Look, on the one hand, it's a very practical issue. The Hebrew Union College had 4 campuses, 4 major plants. That wasn't sustainable. We've known for 30 years it wasn't sustainable. Institutional inertia takes some time and prevented us from moving more quickly on that. Secondly, look, there's a demographic shift also been going on for some time. The Midwest was the heart of the Reform movement in the early days, in the 19th century. That was a positive thing. And the Hebrew Union College existed in Cincinnati in order to serve that Midwestern core of Reform Jews. Now, as we know, Jews have migrated. Of course, they migrated to the coast, they're migrating to the south. If you look at the great Midwestern community, I mean, there are still some sources of strength in Chicago, for example, but a lot of those smaller communities that existed in many cases for a century have now finally either disappeared or almost disappeared. And finally, a big question to which I have no answers is, what's happening to rabbis? Look, there are those who say that we're moving away from a rabbinic-dominated Judaism, and there'll be more secular leaders and more lay leaders. I'm very skeptical about that, perhaps because I'm a rabbi, I acknowledge. I believe that looking at Jewish history, in the absence of rabbis, Jewish communities don't survive. And the overall number of applicants to non-Orthodox rabbinical schools, although I'm not so sure about the Orthodox ones either, is down. And that's something that troubles me. Now, to some extent, what we have is alternative schools. So you have to take that into account. You have the Boston Hebrew College, and you have the Academy of Jewish Religion, which has been kind of revived and is doing better. So there are some signs of hope there. The diversity and the pluralism in that realm, those are good things. Nonetheless, if you look at the numbers now as compared to, say, 40 years ago, they aren't what they should be, and that troubles me. Unless we're going to have a stream of young rabbis, men and women, diverse in belief and practice, coming out of our rabbinical schools, then it's hard to see how we're going to have a vibrant community. So that's where I see cause for concern.
You said very well. And again, you and I did not go to Cincinnati, and I have no emotional tie to it. And yet, I was very saddened when I heard it was closing. And I am also very upset that it is exactly because what you just said. There are not enough young people who want to be, in this instance, Reform rabbis, or maybe rabbis in general. And I agree with you. The rabbi remains, and not every rabbi is wonderful. Doesn't matter. The rabbi remains a critical part of Jewish leadership and Jewish learning and Jewish teaching. There was a library at HUC in Cincinnati that was one of the great libraries in the Jewish world. I don't know that it's been shut down.
No, the library
the library
open.
and the archives are untouched.
Okay, well that's good, because that would be critical. Anyway, I just wanted to mention this as part of our year in review. All right.
Just one footnote, Mark. One does hear Orthodox triumphalism, namely that what we've done is sustaining, what the non-Orthodox are doing is disappearing.
All the time.
Unfortunately, it's been echoed by someone like Ron Dermer, who basically advised the Prime Minister saying, invest in Orthodox Jews and evangelicals, because that's where the future is. The liberal movements are doomed to disappear. I think that's very fundamentally flawed on several grounds. Number one is that it's counterproductive. In other words, if it were accurate, it's only driving people away because that's where the mass base of American Jews are. Number two, it's unfair to the American Jewish experience. These are formulations of Judaism born in the light of emancipation, born in the light of critical scholarship, which Orthodoxy, by and large, finds itself very uncomfortable with, and thoughtful, intelligent Jews who are highly committed and want to lead in a creative and intensive Jewish life will find themselves comfortable within the confines of the non-Orthodox movements. To dismiss them out of hand, to me, is number one, short-sighted, but it's also fundamentally wrong Jewishly.
I would just add a little sort of broadening of that conversation, because we're talking about these sort of two branches really of Judaism that establish themselves in America. You have these Orthodox communities that sort of wanted to build walls around themselves and isolate themselves and say that any engagement with the outside world is going to be problematic and it's going to dilute our Jewish experience. And they exist, throughout the country, especially here in New York. And then you have this other approach which sort of says, let's bring Judaism to the people, where we sort of bring Judaism theologically to a point where the American public, or the majority of the American Jewish public, are, right? But there is a third path, which I would argue certainly looks like today the future of American Judaism. And that started in the 1950s with the Chabad outreach movement. And the idea behind that was bringing the two together, where we say we accept every single Jewish person, wherever they are, whatever their ideals are, whatever their family life looks like. But the ideals are sacrosanct. They may be, from the majority of people, aspirational, but holding those ideals true allows an ideology to avoid becoming diluted in the process and then demotivating and disincentivizing new adherents and new ideologies. So I would say the future is Chabad, or that way of thinking.
David, I understand what you're saying. I've got two major problems with it. Number one is the messianism, and the cult of personality that goes along with it. I think it's been very hurtful in terms of Jewish life. Two are the views towards science, the rejection of modern evolution, modern scientific theory. Chabad has done wonders, and I will freely confess when I travel, I thank God every day that there is a Chabad for obvious reasons. But that said, in terms of, it's done remarkably well in certain sectors of American Jewish life. It suffers from serious ideological shortcomings. Just to put it personally, just the other day I heard a Chabad lecture on tape about messiahship. The lecturer was smart enough not to say the Rebbe was the Messiah. What he did say was that in every generation, there's one person who is qualified to be the Messiah. And in this past generation, that was the Rebbe. I said, good luck. But in that respect, you do have to deal with ideological aspects of Chabad that cut against the grain of where thoughtful, well-educated American Jews have been and are.
And this is a theological debate within Chabad itself, but I'm talking about sort of the practical success, which you really can't argue with in terms of...
They have fantastic restaurants.
And a lot more than that. I mean, Jewish communities across the country.
No one would quarrel with
They
that.
do extraordinary things. I give them tremendous credit. They do things that nobody else does. The interesting question is, to what extent and in what way is it a model for American Jewish life moving forward? That's very unclear to me. And sometimes I watch in admiration when I see a Chabad rabbi at work, and in other times, the fact of the matter is, it's a rabbi-dominated model, often working with minimally committed people who remain minimally committed. So how precisely this is going to become the center of a vibrant, committed, pluralistic, enthusiastic, involved Jewish community as we move ahead, I don't know. Good luck to Chabad. I like to see them thrive. I'm not sure they're the model for the future.
So it's interesting. If you look at the data, and I've written about this before, if you make a lot of assumptions about things staying constant and growth rates staying constant, by about 2040, a majority of American Jews, self-defining, are likely to be Orthodox. And I sit in an interesting position. I grew up secular. I'm a proud member of an Orthodox congregation. I sit kind of in both worlds, and I really do unfortunately see this future reality, if I had to guess, in which there are Orthodox Jews and there are non-Orthodox Jews, and those communities, as is the case now, have assumptions about each other, don't speak regularly outside of forums like this to one another. And I must just say, again, my relationship with the religious aspect of Judaism is through an Orthodox lens, but it is incorrect to say that Orthodox Jews, for example, would be accepting of a patrilineal Jew, or would be accepting of, for example, a queer man or a gay man getting an aliyah at a synagogue. And for example,
saying they would be against it?
synagogue, by the way. Mm-hmm. We have gay men who are freely given aliyahs.
no, and I just to
Well,
finish
but you're
your
a
point.
modern Orthodox Jew.
So
She's
Let me
mainstream.
see where she's going on this.
I think it is frightening for non-Orthodox Jews, and for, quite frankly, me as a modern Orthodox one, to see the trends and not be concerned for where do people go 20 years from now who deeply crave a religious Jewish experience, but are deeply put off by, for example, not being able to sit next to their partner in synagogue, feeling like they have to check aspects of their identity at the door. And just to wrap up this point, I would also be watching within the Orthodox community. It's not that the Orthodox community doesn't change, it just happens at a much more gradual pace. And I think some of the bravest people right now are those within the Orthodox world. For example, Judge Ruchi Fryer and others who created an all-female ambulance corps within the ultra-Orthodox world that gets tremendous pushback from the men of that community. And the women within that system and the gay people within those systems that are deeply trying to uphold their Jewish values and their human rights values that sometimes become at odds with each other, those are some of the bravest people changing American life today.
I want to make the point that whatever the problems of non-Orthodox Judaism and Reform Judaism, we have to beware, in my view, of this narrative of decline and apocalypse and constant Gewaltism. Perhaps our numbers are falling, and perhaps we have all kinds of problems, and I've discussed them and acknowledged them at this table many, many times. There are lots of Reform and non-Orthodox congregations that are thriving. I belong to one in New Jersey. It's a vibrant place. Every single day something is happening. There's worship, and there's Torah study, and there's social justice, and so on. And there are lots of those places.
Yep.
So while the overall numbers may be declining, there's a lot of vibrancy left, and who knows 20 years down the road where exactly we will be. And I've written about this. It's not as if people are not leaving Orthodoxy, as if the assimilation, problem is somehow, a non-Orthodox problem. Off the derech. The truth of the matter is, an Orthodox rabbis that I know have said to me, it happens to us as well. Our kids leave all the time. So I give Orthodoxy credit. I hope they succeed. I want them to be successful. They're facing some of these problems as well.
Oh, but the nice thing is, the more the four of you talk, the more ideas I get for another program. And I'll just have you back, and we'll have to take some of these issues one by one by one.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.